All right. So the first thing that I just wanted to touch on today would be how to create a ClickUp space. So I'm sure many of you are already active ClickUp users, and maybe you're already familiar with how to create a space. Not to worry, we're going to get into more advanced content pretty quickly, but for those of you who are brand new to ClickUp, your spaces live in the sidebar once you've created your ClickUp workspace. These are typically things like departmental spaces or maybe representing high-level business initiatives like a space for OKRs, for example. They just help you to break up the workspace at a high level. So for the purposes of today's session, I'll be working mostly out of this space called projects, but let's say that we were going to actually go through creating a space from scratch. I could just simply add in a new space here. And let's say this is going to be my project management space. You can customize it a little bit with a colorful avatar if you want, and also set up privacy. This is where you'll be able to implement statuses to show how your tasks are moving from beginning to end. So for example, a little bit later, I'll be showing you a list that I made for PTO management. So if I were to customize these for that purpose, maybe I would have new request as a status, denied, and then approved could be my complete status. Now, we do have something called done statuses. So while active statuses are the steps that a task moves through when it's actively going towards completion, and then the closed status is when the task is completely ready to be closed out and disappear. A done status is a way that you can indicate that a task is pretty much done. We don't want to consider it as being overdue, but maybe it's not ready to be completely cleared out of our way and disappear like a closed status task would. So maybe in this case, if I flagged a PTO request as being denied, I would want to just speak with the requester and explain why it was denied. So I'm putting it in a done status for that purpose. ClickUps are a really important area to consider when you're first building out your ClickUp spaces, because this is really what's going to determine the level of complexity of the features within the space. So you only want to turn on the features that you're actually going to be using in the space. The features that you'll definitely want to make sure that you turn on when you're playing around with people management would be time estimates. This will allow you to set duration for tasks to show how long you expect them to take to finish. And then perhaps points. So especially if you're using sprints, this is just a great way to weight tasks with point values. So you can compare easy tasks and difficult tasks when measuring people's workloads. And then finally, just keep in mind in ClickUp, we allow you to see tasks in different ways, including a list format, a board format. In this area, when you're creating a space, if you know that there's a certain view that is friendly for people management that you want to see everywhere within the space, you might want to turn that on here. So if you really love the workload view or the box view, and maybe you don't love the board view so much, you can customize the default settings for your views here. Now we'll come back into the next steps for adding in folders and lists a little bit later, but that's a good place to start in terms of creating your initial space. If you're an admin, you will also be able to check out the Click Apps settings area. There's a couple of tiny customizations related to the sprint points and time estimate Click Apps that you might be interested in. So to look at the time estimate one first, some people prefer to display the time estimates in days rather than hours. So that is a customizable option you can turn on or off. And estimates per assignee is very useful if you are in the habit of assigning tasks to multiple people. So this will actually allow you to set not just a flat estimate for the entire task, but you could set, an estimate of 30 minutes for one person's assignment on the task and 2 hours for another person's. The time estimate roll up option will also allow you to roll up the values of time estimates from subtasks into the parent task value. So if you use subtasks quite a bit, I'd recommend turning this one on as well. And then in regard to sprint points, this similar options apply here. So if you are assigning tasks to multiple people, you could turn on the points per assignee option so that you can put different point values for each person. And the roll up sprint points is going to roll up those subtask sprint point values into the parent task. All right, so now that we've gotten the ClickUp settings out of the way, let's take a look at how to manage team capacity at a high level based on task duration or sprint points in the context of a project that we're managing. So I have a folder here for a project, and then my lists represent the different phases that the project needs to move through on its way to completion. Now, for the project as a whole, I have these different views to see my tasks in different ways. And one of the views is a box view. You can actually create these views at any point, at any level of the hierarchy by clicking on the plus view button up here. So that's how we've added in our box view. But the box view is a great way to see tasks grouped by assignee. So here I can see a box for each person that has assigned tasks inside of the folder called project. And I can measure their workload in a few different ways. So I can measure it based on time, which is really useful because I can compare the cumulative time estimated for their tasks and then the cumulative time that they've tracked against that estimate. And then I can see a percentage for how much more time they will need to track to meet the estimate. We also have a workload bar up here just to give me a high level view of how much time people have done versus not done of the estimated hours. And if it seems like someone's getting a little too overwhelmed, or maybe someone actually has room to take on more work, I can start to drag and drop tasks between different people to assign them out. Now, if you were to start using points, the measuring based on points will allow you to see for their completed tasks, how many tasks have they checked off and how many points were allocated to those tasks versus how much is left to be done. So I'll just briefly click to open up a task here so you can see exactly where these point and estimate values would be input. The estimate icon is going to look like a little hourglass when it's empty up here. So I can come in here and say, this is going to take me 14 hours. Or if I was using points, I would just click on the little points icon up top and input that here. We put some default point values in for you when you enable this ClickUp, but in the sprint point settings area, just keep in mind, you can change the point values as well if you like to think about them a little bit differently. Now, let's say this task was actually assigned to a couple people. Since we have turned on the breakdown of estimates and points by assignee, you can see now that I can come in here and set different values for each person so that they're working a different amount of time on the task. And they can also have different point values for their work. If we start adding in subtasks, maybe for here it would be initial interviews for my support team that I'm trying to hire. And I start putting in an estimate here or some points. When I go back to the parent task, we'll start to be able to see the roll up with the subtasks as well. So hopefully that helps to give you a basic overview of how to start inputting those point values. Let's chat a little bit now about our workload view. So box view is actually one of our oldest views in ClickUp. It's been around for a few years, and this was our original way to kind of manage people resources based on their number of tasks. The workload view is a newer feature, and it's a bit more robust in terms of visualizing someone's capacity over time. So this is going to show you each assignee's tasks over a given period of time. So that would be 1 or 2 weeks. Now, just like the box view, you can measure workload in this view in different ways. So right now I am measuring based on time. And I can set a capacity for how much time each person should be able to take on per week. This is really useful because if you have a mix of people that are, full-time employees, or maybe this person only works part-time, I can adjust their capacity accordingly. And then you'll be able to see how close someone is to their capacity per day based on the dark green color. And if someone exceeds their capacity, this will turn red, so you'll know they can't take on more work. If I click on this area, I'll actually see a drop down of all of their assigned tasks over time for each day. And I will see unscheduled tasks over here on the right. So if someone has a bit more room in their day, I can drag and drop that onto their schedule, and I can start to allocate that work for them. Now you'll notice how when this task product meetings was only slated for 1 day on the 12th, Carvania was way over her capacity. So what I did was I extended this out to instead give her 3 days to work on it. And that split up her capacity a little bit more so that she's a little bit under and she has 3 days to complete the task. A feature that a lot of people ask about is it possible to indicate when a task spans multiple days like this one that the person should work different amounts of time on the task each day? For example, only 2 hours on the 12th, but 3 hours on the 13th and 4 hours on the 15th. That isn't possible yet. It is something we will be releasing in the future, but right now it's going to split the capacity evenly across the start and end dates. You can also drag and drop stuff between different people. So if I wanted to reassign something to Carvania or Tom from Sophia, I could move the task around to redelegate, just like in the box view. And you'll also have your unassigned bucket of tasks down here. So if you want to see anything that maybe has a date but doesn't have any assignees on it, you'll be able to pull those into different people's availability. Points, you'll probably get a very similar idea to box view. This is just going to show you the points that someone has across their assigned tasks by date, but you can set a capacity. So if you're doing sprint planning, this can be really useful to look ahead and define how many points someone should be able to take on per week and schedule their tasks accordingly. Now, one other way you can measure workload in both the box and the workload view is by number of tasks. This one is the simplest way to think about measuring workload, but it's not an exact science because, as you can imagine, not every task is as difficult as the next. So some tasks might take you 30 minutes, whereas some others might take 3 months. But that being said, if you're just getting started with capacity planning, this might be a good option for you, and you can still set capacity for how many tasks someone can take on per day. The last thing I'll mention about the workload view would be there is an ability to group by other criteria and not just assignee. So for example, in this use case, I might want to group by list so that when I'm looking at my project at a high level, I can see for phase 1, 2, 3, and 4, what's my workload across different periods of time. You can even group by something like a custom field. So if you have a drop-down field for review status for a different task, you can group to see the tasks that match different drop-down custom field values. Let's chat a little bit about how to manage a PTO request intake system. The system I've created is very simple. I've just made a simple standalone list within my project space called Project Team Time Off Requests. And I have set up a custom status workflow at the list level to manage the requests. Now, this is important to note because when I first made the other space at the beginning of the webinar, you saw where I could create that custom status workflow. Tasks are always going to take on their space level statuses by default, but in this case, I needed certain folders and lists to have a slightly different workflow than the parent space. So what I did for this list is just go into the list settings area and set up list level statuses that are custom and different from the space just for my PTO intake process. We have a feature called the form view, which is a really great way to streamline any sort of information intake process, whether that's a job application, internal feedback, or in this case, a PTO request. So I've created a form view that is tied to my list here to manage time off requests. And anything that comes in via this form is going to create a new task in ClickUp for me to take action on in the time off request list, because that's where I created the form. One of the cool things about this is that you can brand the form. So if this is a public facing form that you embed on your website or something, you could have your logo at the top. And all I did to create this form was drag and drop various standard or custom fields into the form. So we'll come back to this form in just a moment, but I'll briefly walk you through the beginning steps to create your own type of form like this. So you can simply start by creating the form. I always recommend giving it a relevant name. When you create the form, you can add a description in here to give a little more clarity about what you want the person to do when they submit the form. And then each of these standard fields will be matched to a ClickUp task field. So task name, I can drag it onto the form and rename it for the submitter's benefit to something like, please indicate your name. You'd likely put the start and due date fields as well for desired start, vacation time and date, and just allow time input as well. Make sure that you indicate if something should be optional or required by checking or unchecking this box as well. And if you have some fields that aren't being satisfied with the standard options up here, you will likely want to create a custom field to manage that. So I created a couple of these custom fields for my other PTO form, but you could create something here for, what request type is this? And you could have vacation or sick leave as your options. And once you create that, you would be able to drag and drop that onto the form to have someone fill that in as well. Now, jumping back into my other form. There's a couple of other cool features that I put in here that you might be interested in. You can add an automatic assignee so that when the form comes in, it will always be assigned to a certain person. So maybe the HR manager or something. You can also add a redirect URL. So if you don't put anything in here, someone will just, when they fill this out, they'll just get a little pop-up message to show that the form was submitted. However, what I've done here is put in a redirect URL to another view that I have made called My Submitted Requests. And this view is filtered to find a people custom field called Who Are You? Where Who Are You is me. So someone will be redirected here as soon as they submit their request to keep track of the status of all of the requests they've put in for the HR manager. All right, so once this is all ready to go, you can either share a public link to the form for someone to fill in, or you can embed it on a company website or something, or someone can simply come into the viewing mode in the form view to fill it out. Another feature that you might want to utilize in this scenario would be automation. So I have set up some automation for this list. And for those of you who aren't familiar with this feature, this is simply a way to create triggers that will prompt actions to take some of the manual work off of your plate when you're managing this process. So in this case, my trigger would be when the task is created. Then I want to mention the HR manager via a comment, asking her to review this request and apply the appropriate time estimate and approve or deny the request. The other automation that I've set up here is when due date arrives, change status to complete. So since I'm using tasks here to input each time off request, when the due date elapses for the time off they've requested, I just want the task to be closed out and disappear from my view. So let me fill this out to show you an example of what this would look like if I were filling this out. So let's say I am Tom Bloom, taking time off for vacation. Requested start time would be Wednesday at 8 a.m. End time would be Friday at 5 p.m. And once I submit that, I would be taken to my submitted requests, but that would actually only happen if I had filled it out via the direct link. So that's just something to note. All right, so looking, if I were Carvania, in this case, the HR manager, from this list view, I'd be able to see that the new request had come in from Tom, and I can open that up. I would have gotten a notification about this to check out the task as well. So let's say that I have taken a look at this and I have approved the request. I would be able to check this off to say, yes, I've seen this notification, I am good to go. And then I can observe the time off that they've requested, which would be about 3 days. So I would set the time estimate here to 24 hours, or 48 hours rather. 72 hours, third time's the charm. So in this scenario, let's say that we are basing the duration, we're basing the workload based on duration of the tasks. That's the one thing about this use case to keep in mind. There isn't a way to automate a time estimate value being added to the task based off of the dates that the person puts in. So that would be something that the person managing the request would have to input. But once that is done, then I'd be able to say, I'm going to approve this, and I can reassign this to Tom so that it will show up against his workload. Now, how is this going to roll up for someone managing Tom when they're considering if he has room to take on work in our project view. At the space level, we have a workload view that has been created for availability. So what the hiring manager or the project manager would be able to do would be come to the space level view, and as they are browsing someone's availability, if they're considering if Tom has room to take on more work, they would be able to see that he is blocked off there for his vacation. And so when they're looking to consider if they should be able to schedule him for work, he is unavailable during that time. So they would know not to touch his workload. They'd have to give tasks to someone else. And then via the automation, once the due date for the vacation arrives, it'll be set to complete. So that will no longer be accounted for in the workload view. It'll be clear to the hiring manager that he can take on more work once the task has been completed. One other thing you could do here is add a filter at the high level space view. So what I've done is filter by status to exclude anything that is in those PTO list statuses in regards to new requests or denied requests. I'm only going to show things that are approved. You might also say, I don't want to see anything that is marked as complete, because I'll assume that that's done and it's not counting against their capacity anymore. All right, a couple of other things that you could utilize here in regard to visualizing when and where your team is active, where they're spending their time, where they're falling behind. One great feature to be aware of is the profile. So anywhere in the app, if you click on someone's name or their picture, this will open up their profile. And in here, click on myself actually, because there'll be a little more activity. But in here, you'll be able to see where has this person been active in the past and what types of activity have they contributed. So for example, maybe you'd want to see what recent comments have they added, or have they changed any due dates recently that I might need to follow up on here. You'll also be able to visualize trending tasks for the person. So this is anywhere someone has been viewing a task, editing it, or commenting on it. And you'll see in the My Work section, their tasks arranged by date. So what's going on for them today, what is overdue for them, and what's coming up in the future here. Finally, you'll be able to see the calendar view for this person if you want to just take a look at their daily agenda. At a higher level view, Pulse is also a great way to see who is active in the platform and when. So this will show you hour by hour throughout the day who's online and who's not. So you'll be able to see at that moment who's actively in ClickUp. And if you click on someone's avatar, you'll again be able to see their recent trending tasks where they've been spending time. This can also work for guests. So if you've invited guests for clients to be able to get insight into ClickUp, or for contractors, something like that, guests can also be shown inside of the Pulse view. Dashboard reporting is also an interesting way to get high-level oversight into what people are working on. So this allows you to create a dashboard that is private to you by default, but you can always share the dashboard with other people within your workspace if you'd like them to participate in the dashboard with you. So I'll just walk you through a few of the different example dashboard widgets we have here. The first would be the task list widget. So let's say you're managing one-on-ones for an employee, and you want to get some oversight into how much time off has this person requested over the past quarter or year in comparison with their daily workload and how many tasks they're contributing to. I've just filtered a view around that one particular list for time off requests. And then I'm able to just have this on hand when I have my one-on-one with this person. I can click to open up the task to get any additional insight I need as well. The pie chart is one of our custom widgets. So custom widgets allow you to group by different criteria. In this case, I've grouped by assignee within my space called projects so that I can get a sense of how much work is on each person's plate. If you are using time tracking, you may also want to check out the calculation widget as a way to see the cumulative time tracked versus estimated for all tasks within a given location. So what I've done for these two widgets is pulled in the time tracked and estimated for everything going on within that one space called projects. So I can compare at a high level how much time have we added compared to what our estimation was to complete the project. Especially if you use sprints, you may be interested in the lead time widget because this will show you the average time from the moment a task is created to when it is closed out over a specified period of time. So if you're pulling in various sprints or even just simple projects that you're managing, you can see over time, on average, how long is it taking me to close out these tasks. And then finally, I have another task list widget down here, which is grouping tasks by assignee, and it has some filtering incorporated as well to only focus on things that are due today and earlier. So if I have a one-on-one with someone, I can take a look at this and open it up to follow up with them on anything that they need help with to complete the action item. Just a few final thoughts for you before we open it up for Q&A. I wanted to talk about some of our ready-made templates as well as automation. If you want to be able to imitate the project structure I have here, definitely go into our template center, which you can do from the sidebar, and browse through our community templates area. So the community template area will show you all of the ready-made templates that have been made for you by either us here at ClickUp or vetted ClickUp users, and they are filterable by use case. So if you know you're looking for the project management side of things, like the template I use today, you could simply drop that template into your workspace. Another one that you might be interested in is something like an applicant tracking system. So we could have utilize our hiring pipeline folder, which should be under our human resources use case. Hiring candidates. So if I were to use this one, maybe I'd want to do my hiring pipeline here. And I can just drop this in to show you. This one has some really excellent custom fields to create a ranking system. And there's also a great form incorporated in the template. So you can see another use case for collecting applications for different roles at your company with a form. So in this template, we have a folder for the hiring pipeline and then lists for each of the roles that we're hiring for. And we're using custom fields to keep track of relevant contact information for the applicant, as well as the amount of relevant experience they have. There's also a variety of rating custom fields incorporated in this template. So this is an approach that we utilize in our hiring process, which is to create a scorecard. So as we're working with a candidate, we can add various notes. We can have this rating system to determine if they're a good fit for the role. And then you can even do cool things like create different board views with grouping around those custom fields. So if I wanted to have a board grouped around the experience level of applicants, I could group by that drop-down custom field for experience level. And this does include a form template to give you an example of an application that someone could put in for a specific position. A couple of automations that you might also consider implementing would be an automation to remind people when a task is due. So let's say for my projects folder, if we go back there, I could set up a folder level automation to trigger a reminder to an assignee based on the task's due date. So when due date arrives, I could add a comment and @mention the assignees to say, what's the status of this task? Due date is here. And they would get a notification in ClickUp so that they will be, they'll be able to jump in there and provide an update. Lastly, we have a great Teams feature which will allow you to create assignee groups or @mention groups in bulk. So if you're working with a dedicated group of people, if you're an admin, you'll be able to come in here and create a team. So maybe this is my QA team here. I can add different members into that team so that I can assign them in bulk. I can @mention them in a task altogether without needing to individually assign these people to tasks or @mentioning them individually. All right, so hopefully that was some helpful information to guide you as you start to improve your people management process. But at this point, I'm going to take a look into the Zoom Q&A tab and open it up for questions. So again, feel free to send in your questions in the Q&A tab and we'll take some time to answer those now. We have a question. Can you @mention watchers as well? Yes, you can @mention watchers. So inside of a task, you can do this both in the description or in the comment area. You can @mention a watcher or a team to say hello, get their attention. Sometimes I'll do this when I'm writing a task to loop in the customer success team too. I'll say, hey, customer success or service, please give this a look today. Brandy asks about how to create the rating fields, the stars that we saw in the hiring pipeline template. That's really easy to do. You can just go into the settings menu for whatever folder or list you want to put the custom field in for, and just go to the custom fields option, and you can create a new field, which would be the rating option. So, it could be work ethic rating. And you can actually choose the emoji type, so it can be pretty fun. You can add whatever you want and put a number scale on there, and then you can create that field and it will be applied for your tasks. So we'll be able to see that in here now at the bottom, now that we have added in that rating. Darren asks, if I created a form in ClickUp Forms to capture data that needed to be used by an external supplier, can I set an automation that notifies them that a new task/record has been created? Yeah, that's actually an interesting use case. So if you want to send an @mention to someone, it has to be an actual ClickUp user. But if it's someone that's outside of ClickUp, you may be interested in checking out our email in ClickUp feature, which is something that you can enable in the integrations area if you're an admin. And this will actually allow you to send an email from ClickUp to anyone even if they're not a ClickUp user. So this can actually even be be automated. Let's say I wanted to set up a trigger anytime someone puts in an application for my client success team. In the comment area, I'd be able to send them an email here. So if they put in their email address when they submitted the application in that email custom field, ClickUp's going to suggest that I send to that address. And then you can even include templates in this email feature. So if I got a new application, I could plug in this template to thank them for their application. I can even have a nice signature in there, and I can send that off to them. So that would be the manual way to do it. But to show you how this could be automated, in the automation area, there is an email section. And in here, you could set up a trigger. So for example, when a task is created via that form, I just choose the account I'd want to send the email from. And I could say, I want to send something to the email custom field value that the person put in the form. And I want to plug in that template to say that we've gotten your application and we want to thank them for submitting it. So that would just automatically send off the email to the person. And if they email you back, it's going to actually come into the comment thread. So you'll be able to reply back and forth to them in the ClickUp comment thread, and they won't even know that you're sending it from a ClickUp task. Isita, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. You ask, can forms be embedded on websites? They can. So when you're creating a form, just know under the share area, you can copy the embed code to embed that on a website. Jose, is the time tracked available for calculated columns? Can't seem to find it when trying to create one dividing sprint points and time tracked. In list view, we do have a calculated column feature. So for example, if I show my time tracking, I can sort the entire column. And then I am able to add that up at the bottom. Now, if you're using a formula field, which is a way to create calculations between different numeric fields, so maybe, calculating point value times time tracked or something like that. If I were to plug that in, I could just pick the two fields that I wanted to calculate in here, choose the function. I guess it won't work with the point value. That's something that I did not actually know. So that's a good thing to note. So it looks like that's a current limitation of the formula where you can't calculate across with the points, but that's very likely will something adjust in the future. But you could do it if instead of our official points feature, you were using like a number custom field to represent points. Now that's just going to calculate it horizontally. There isn't currently a way to vertically calculate all formula values or something like that at the moment, although I know that's on our radar to adjust sometime in the future. Question from Darren. What can a guest do within a space that they are invited to? So guests can only be invited to folders, lists, or tasks. They cannot be invited to spaces at all. And they will also only see the items that you specifically share with them. So for example, if I were to share my strategy list with a contractor as a guest, I could just punch in their email here, or if they're an existing guest, I can share it with them. And then I can choose their permissions. So I can give them the ability to edit and create tasks, the ability to edit but not create anything, comment only, or view only access. So depending on the permissions you give them to whatever you share, that's going to define what they can or cannot do. Tice, you ask, can I split a task automatically when a vacation is taken in the middle of a task? You cannot split a task automatically. So let's say, this is a really long task. Maybe its start date is May 1st, and someone takes their vacation from the 11th to the 14th. You cannot say, I don't want any duration to be allocated for that person during those days. You would need to, if you use something like the PTO system I showed earlier today, and someone put in a task to block off their duration for those days, then their workload on those days would be flagged in the workload view as red, but the task itself isn't going to be automatically split based on that. Dorian, you ask, can someone with comment only access submit a form and be able to only see their submitted forms and not anyone else's? So if you give someone comment only access, like let's say, for example, we go back to this list. If you give someone comment only access to this list, they are going to see all of the views that are associated with that list, unless the views are personal. So if you create a personal view, it will only be visible to yourself, so the person wouldn't see it. But what you need to do is, or what I would likely recommend is sharing a view filtered around submitter. So something like this, you could create a view for that person to say, submitter is Don Maldonado, and you could create a publicly shared link to that view, which you could share with that person so that they could keep track of what's going on in that particular view. But you would probably just want to share the individual tasks with the person and not the whole list as a guest with comment only access if you don't want them to see other tasks in that list. I have a question. Is there any way to figure out if some team members are not tracking their time? There are some dashboard widgets that you could use here in the time tracking area. So in time tracking, for example, you can see a timesheet of over a specific period of time for everyone or specific individuals. You can see who has or hasn't been tracking time day by day. That would probably be the best way to keep track of who's falling behind on their timesheets or not. Shanta, when you were showing us the automation for HR to check vacation requests in the comment, how did you get the box for HR to check that she's seen it? Oh yeah, so that is our assigned comment feature. So what I did there, just to show you, would be when a task is created, I'd add a comment and say, please do this. You can mention them too if you want. And then there's an assigned comment button here. And that's where you'd put that in. And then that will create that assigned comment that actually needs to be checked off by the person. From someone asks, the box view is available for guests with full access, but the actual workload view, which members have access to, is not available for guests with full access. We have business licenses. If anyone from the support team wants to chime in on this, I'd welcome you to jump in, but I believe that the workload view, as long as you're on the business plan, can be added as much as you want and shared with guests as well. All right, so we have time for just a couple more questions if there's anyone else that would like to ask something. So feel free to jump in, but Manly, you ask, is there a way through the ClickUp Chrome extension to create a task from a Gmail email and have the email thread continue on in the ClickUp task? No, there isn't. So if you were to use the Chrome extension to send an email into ClickUp and then you wanted to open up this kind of email comment chain in that same deposited email from the Chrome extension, it's going to create two separate threads. It has to be started from here, and then you have to go back and forth via the actual task comment when someone writes back to your email from outside of ClickUp. Is it somehow possible to track remaining days of vacation per person? Interesting. Perhaps you could use the calculated column here. So let's say maybe you could have a view grouped around who are you in this instance. Like if I block this off for 2 work days and I grouped by the people custom fields, you could sum up for all approved tasks, like filtering to only see tasks that have the approved status. I could sum up the cumulative time estimated, and then you could have maybe a number custom field for allowed hours or allowed days of time off, like a number custom fields, and then you could compare those values side by side as calculated columns. That's kind of the only way I can think to do that one at the moment, though. All right, so we're just about ready to close out this session, but thank you so much again for taking the time to attend. I hope this gave you some helpful ideas for people management. We will be posting this recording on our website and sending you the recording via email in the next day or so, so definitely be on the lookout for that. But again, we really appreciate your support, and if you do have any additional questions about the items covered today, don't forget to check out the Help Center in the app. You can open up a chat with our support team to ask a question, and you can also check out those previous webinar recordings. We'll be posting this one there in the next day or so, and check out our YouTube and doc areas here. So hopefully this was helpful, and we look forward to hearing from you very soon. Thanks again.